marketing. Hello, welcome to Localize the World, Yelena.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much for coming. Could you first briefly introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, of course. So I come from Ukraine many years ago. I studied here in college. I went to Berkeley for undergrad, and I studied Slavic languages and literatures and rhetoric, which prepared me well for the Monterey Institute, which is what I did for grad school. I was in the translation and localization management program there. And upon graduating in 2014, I was a project manager ever since. All working on marketing content. So from SDL to GoPro to WhatsApp, all localizing marketing content. And then it came full circle. I am now back at the Middlebury Institute, teaching localization, teaching both marketing, help center localization, and advanced project management.
Wow. So I'm curious, did you know that you wanted to go into localization first when you started studying Slavic languages at Berkeley?
Not yet. I had no idea what localization was or that it even existed. I knew I wanted to do something with languages, and most likely that was going to be translation. But the further I got into my studies at Berkeley, I realized that I wanted to do something more, something a little bit more than just working with words. And then it was one of those things, right place, right time. I was just in the hallway outside of one of my classes, and two people walked by, and I caught words. I caught localization. No, I didn't catch localization. That wasn't part of it. I caught Monterey, language, translation.
Oh my God.
And I couldn't, and I back then I didn't bring laptops to class or anything like that. So I took a note, translation, Monterey, and what was the third? So it was three words altogether. And then I came home and I Googled those three words, and then the Middlebury Institute came up, and I saw the localization program and how it was introduced then. It was technology and business and translation. And I thought, this is for me. This is exactly what I was looking for. And only then did I realize that that was what I wanted to go into. And that was like senior year of undergrad.
Wow, that is so interesting because for me, I also went to Berkeley. I studied the Korean language, and I was just working at the tea house in one of the, like on University Avenue. And I overheard this conversation where they were talking about there's this guy who had like a Chinese translator like ID card with him. And I got curious and I asked him questions about translation. And then one thing led to another. He said, Middlebury language translation.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so now I'm here too.
That's awesome. I love how those coincidences work.
Yeah, so our topic today though is how localization makes international marketing happen, because that is your specialty. On a foundational level, just talk a little bit about it. Localization can help bring marketing campaigns to an international audience, right, by translating the actual content into multiple languages, but also adapting that context to fit each individual locale. But on a strategic and like tactical level, there's so much more to unpack on that. For you, Yelena, what is the process on localizing marketing content, and does it differ from localizing any other type of content, like say legal or product?
Sure. So before starting any kind of marketing work, let's say, for example, where our company is looking to launch a new feature or a new product or something completely new, right? And a lot of teams are involved in sending the localization team assets to translate to localize. So the first thing, we want to ensure consistency across all of those. So before we work on any project, we want to get the glossary done first, right? Meaning that we sit down with the product team, usually the product team, and we extract 10, 20, 50, it doesn't matter how many, but we extract the core terms and we translate those first. And that the project looks just like that. It's just a list of 20 terms that we're going to translate so that we populate the TM, so that when a marketing team or when a legal team sends us a project, those terms, we will know already how to translate them, and they will be consistent with our product, with the live UI or the live strings that are in the product. And they're all going to be consistent for our user to recognize them. After we have the glossary complete, and then for all other projects going forward for that product or feature, because we don't do the glossary project for every single asset, we do it for the first one. And then after that, so we receive a project from marketing. And usually how that differs is these are loose files. which means that there's no connector, there's no script that will take the words from this Photoshop file and put it into our CAT tool, our computer assisted translation tool, where the translation happens. What that means for us is that we lose file and we have to prepare it for translation, which means we have to manually extract the text. Usually our suppliers have a script that would do that automatically or relatively quickly. But roughly what that means is literally copying and pasting words from the Photoshop file or from this creative file, Figma or Sketch, and we put it into an Excel spreadsheet. And that is the file that we put into our CAT tool. Then our translator translates, reviewer reviews it in the computer assisted translation tool, which means they don't see anything in context. They just see the English word and the target word side by side. No imagery, no visuals, nothing else. It's just text. Then we have a team called DTP team, the desktop publishing team. This is basically the design team that take the exported Excel sheet from this CAT tool, and they take the words and they put them back into this Photoshop file or whatever the loose multimedia file it is. It could be a video, and they put it back into those files. They build them. And then we have, let's say, 10 languages. So we have 10 posters or 10 videos. And then we have the same person who did review conducts in context review, meaning that the first time when they conducted review, this was in the CAT tool. They only saw text. Now they see the final poster and with all of the formatting, with all of the imagery, and they do a final sweep of review, making sure that the text is not too long. It doesn't go on to 3 lines when it should only just be 1 tagline, for example, or the text is not cut off because it's too big. Then they can offer a different translation. They can make the font smaller, or they can say, let's change the translation to something else so that it fits better in this specific context. Even though the translation was right, it just looks better now in the final context. And then the desktop publishing team incorporates all of those changes. The linguist gives it a final pass again to make sure that nothing new got broken, because usually the desktop publishing team doesn't speak all of our languages. That's why a linguist has to have that final sign off, because they're essentially responsible for the final quality. And then that's it. Then we deliver the file. The only way that that differs from product or legal is that legal is usually the same. For a product, usually they have a script that gets the strings into the CAT tool. So there's no file preparation needed. The DTP step is usually called build for the product team. They have an automated script that would take the text and build it into the final version, the final feature, the final product. And in context review, usually we would just call it linguistic QA for a product. Otherwise, the process is exactly the same. We need to get the product or the marketing asset into our CAT tool so that we translate it. After the translation, we need to rebuild the asset, regardless if it's a product or marketing or legal, and then we have to review that. On a high level, the process is exactly the same. Some teams have automated scripts that do some of these steps, but essentially it's the same work for all content types.
Wow. So it's like you take the original content, break it down so that you have that text that you can translate it, build it back together again, and then check to see if it looks kind of the same as the original.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So I want to bring back what you said a little bit earlier about a TM. Could you explain what a TM is and how important is it in marketing translation? Or is it different because, well, we'll get to that later.
That's a good question. So the translation memory is essentially, so I mentioned this computer assisted translation, right? This is a software that allows us as project managers to upload the source content into this tool and it's an interface for our linguists to do their translation. Think about it roughly as they open up 2 Word documents, the source on the left and the target on the right. And they can look back and forth from the left and translate onto the right. The CAT tool makes that step a little bit easier. It's just one open program. They have the source and they have the target all in one nice interface. Another thing that helps, another benefit of the CAT tool is, as you mentioned, the translation memory. As the linguists are translating in this CAT tool, all of those segments get saved into the translation memory. And then in a future project, if the cat tool recognizes a string that was already translated before, a month ago, a day ago, a year ago, it will offer it to you with the translation that you used a month ago, a day ago, or a year ago. And it will save you time, but it will also save you in terms of consistency. You won't have to translate the same sentence different ways, because then that will confuse the user. Wait a minute, you've translated it once like this, and then you translated it differently now. Are we talking about the same thing, or am I missing something? Are they different?
So just one more follow-up question about the TM. Is it used differently in a marketing context versus like a product context? Because like product, it's very simple, right? There's specific, you said in the glossary, there's specific terms that you would use. But then in marketing, maybe they will say it a little different way. Maybe there's metaphors or idioms. And so not everyone is going to translate it in the same way, would they?
Exactly correct. So in product, you're right, where everything has to be consistent, right? If we're going to send a message one way, we have to keep translating it the same exact way for all updates, for all different features, for all different products within our company, right? To ensure consistency. But you noted exactly correctly that for marketing, this doesn't seem as important, right? Because the taglines change. And that's exactly what happens, because usually marketing is very creative content. The translation memory is less useful to us, specifically for marketing, unless we are advertising a specific new feature that the product team has now created. So for example, let's say WhatsApp would have created a new feature, and marketing wants to market that specific feature. So we want to leverage the TM, the translation memory from product, so that in the marketing translations, we use the same terminology. So that you see in send a message in your app or in your in the product, the marketing campaign, if they want to say, use that term, send a message, so it has to match exactly. It can't be created, it can't be translated in a different way, or it can't be translated creatively, because then your user will be confused. Are we talking about the same thing, or are we not?
So you're saying that the translation memory, you wouldn't just maybe use the marketing translation memory, but maybe for marketing purposes, you can use product related translation memory in that case?
That's correct, yes.
That's pretty neat. I didn't know that. Okay, so when it comes to marketing content, like there's so many different types, like print, billboards, video, blogs, and social media nowadays, right? So when it comes to localization of that content, like, is everything localized? Like, what is actually localized and why is it localized?
Sure, that's a really good question. You'll be able to cut it out, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I prepared all my answers. I want to read through.
Oh, thank you.
So whenever possible, I would always advise to localize as much as possible, right? Everything that we put in front of our English speaking user, we want to put the same exact information out for our target user, right? In other countries. Because then if we don't, then they're technically receiving second class service from us, right? Our English speaker gets everything, and then our users in other countries will only get a subset of that material. So usually I would try to suggest to localize as much as we can, as much as we are putting out in front of the English user. However, though, what I wouldn't localize is, let's say, a social media post when a company doesn't have a local page. For example, if a company doesn't have, let's say GoPro, if GoPro doesn't have Twitter Brazil for GoPro, right? I would suggest we'd not localize the post into Portuguese, into Brazilian Portuguese, because then if you only have the one social media page, right, just the one Twitter page, and you localize the post into 10 languages, will you have the same post appear in the timeline, in the news feed, just 10 times in different languages? That's very noisy for your user. You could, what some companies do, for example, on Facebook, is they pick just 5 languages and they will make one post, and then all 5 of those posts is like a carousel. It's like a carousel of images, like 5 posters, and
Mhm.
it's still just one post, and then your user could scroll through 5. In that case, I wouldn't recommend that they do more than 5, because then it's a never-ending scroll. That would be the first one. Blogs is an interesting one because blogs used to have a reputation that users could interact with them. It was expected that users would leave a comment. So if a company didn't have a representative that would respond and interact with users, then it was just discouraged to localize a blog. Now, though, that has changed. And now this is just a better way, it's a casual way to communicate, educate, and raise awareness to your users about your brand or about your product or feature. So now we usually suggest to localize blogs in as many languages as you support. They're usually text only and not that expensive. That said, though, it really depends on the region and target audience. So for example, we might choose to keep some content in English intentionally, like let's say for some regions in India, where maybe for younger generations, we might target them with an English ad because English is considered cool and upper class. So in general, I would say it's more about the region, the audience, and it's resource-based rather than specific content type. 2 more points about when I would discourage localization. One is when the source is a very low quality. I would send that back to get the source rewritten, and then we would localize it. Or, and this one can go both ways, if the user journey is not localized. So for example, if your app is not localized in French, right? Then it will probably not make sense to localize your ad in French, because you'll get your user excited, like, yeah, I want to use this. And oh, but I don't speak a word of English. So you got me interested with the ad, but
Mhm.
I can't use your app. So in that case, target the French audience in English. Those who speak English will be able to use your product. And those who don't, well, they wouldn't have been able to use your product anyways. That's not the fault of the marketing ad.
Oh, I think that's a really good point. Like, don't translate it if you can't actually back it up, right? If you don't have that functionality for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think with when it comes to localization, one of the well, actually creating anything, when it comes to creating something, you have to think of the end user in mind. And recently, I've learned that that's something called human-centered design. And so, with localization as well, how much I don't know how much of that thought process goes into the localization team, thinking about that end user, or is it just more focused on getting translation products done for these different stakeholders like marketing or product or legal?
For localization, it's all about the end user. Unfortunately, our stakeholders seem to not really have this user-centric mindset, right? A lot of the times we're asked to deliver faster, 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 cut corners, remove one of the layers of review, just get this done faster and faster. That tells us that we're not really thinking about the user. The stakeholder isn't thinking about the user. Because if we're cutting corners and we're delivering back a less than ideal version, then what's the point of localizing it at all, right? And that's what I have seen happen a lot of cutting corners. And it just, to me, it doesn't make sense. Why do we want to cut corners if that is going to give our user a suboptimal user experience?
So this brings up a really interesting point. Like you're saying that they don't really understand the end user, like they don't think about localization. So when it comes to marketing, when I talk to marketing people about localization, they're like, what is that? Like my sister, who's a graphic designer at ServiceNow, like she's in a pretty high position, knows a lot of people, and yet like she just learned about localization when I told her about it when I started the program. So like for you, have you experienced any of those like what is localization moments with the marketing team that actually hampered an international marketing campaign, and how do you get over that moment?
Always, it's so
Always.
common. Always, yeah. It's so unfortunate that localization is not taught in marketing school or in MBA programs. You can't think about international marketing without putting a lot of emphasis on localization. People, my marketing stakeholders who I've worked with, they tend to assume that everyone speaks English at least to some extent. And that's absolutely not true. This is one of the most frustrating parts for me because it seems so intuitive, right? If you want to reach your global users, you need to speak their language, right?
Mhm.
No one will buy a product or use a service that they don't understand. And for me, the best way to get over those moments is to constantly engage in stakeholder education. Like, come up with creative ways to drive the point home. Pseudo localize a marketing poster and present it to your stakeholder. They'll see gibberish, right? After you pseudo localize something. And then you can explain this is how your users see the English poster. It takes
Mm.
time and money to publish that poster in a different country. And it's the same thing as publishing it in gibberish. Might as well not even do it. And that starts to kind of drive the point home a little bit. Sometimes bringing your linguists into the meeting to have them explain why certain elements will be offensive to users in other countries, that drives the point home even better. Because they're the subject matter experts, right? If they're saying this is going to distract our user, or this is not going to work because nobody understands English, it's really hard to argue with a subject matter expert when they're sitting in the room. Should I re-say that?
That's fine.
Um, let me see.
I'm learning a lot.
Awesome. Also, whenever possible, have data to back up your arguments. So, for example, how many purchases per month did you have with an English only website? And then how many purchases did you have when you started to localize? Obviously, that number is going to not even double. It's going to quadruple times 7 times 8, right? Depending on how many languages you have. So it's a lot easier to say, listen, English is only a fraction of our total revenue. It's only a fraction of all of our users. It's not even half. It's just a small fraction. So that's why an English only ad falls on deaf ears. It just doesn't work. You can ask the question, how long does it take to create a beautiful marketing slogan? It takes months, always months, even if it's just 3 words, right? Because they're thinking about every single word. They're substituting with something else. They're throwing it away and starting over. So then why should localization have 1 hour? Let's say if it is a tagline for 3 words, right? It takes the creativity out of marketing and makes localization a mechanical element. It's like machine is just translating the words. And that's not the value that localization brings in. Google Translate can do that. We, as the localization team, we bring the creative elements back into marketing. For example, look at GoPro's accessories. They trademark their names, and so they're all in English. So how is a French speaker or a Russian speaker or a German speaker supposed to know that a chest mount is called chesty if they don't know the word for chest is chest, right?
Yeah.
How do they know that a dog harness mount is called fetch if they don't know what the word fetch means, right? They don't know that fetch means to throw and then your dog is going to run and bring the ball back, right? To them, the word in French fetch or in German fetch is just, it's gibberish. They'll take their business elsewhere and they'll buy the accessory from a different website, from a different store, from a different company, and we lose out.
I think, well, IKEA does something similar where they name their furniture, their items in their language, like not in English, right?
Oh, that's a really good point, actually. Okay, actually, that's a really, really good point. I wonder if they have descriptions, though, that it works with the search engine optimization, right? If it's the name could be whatever, right? But if they have a description that describes in the native language what the item is, then if you're looking for example, for IKEA, if you're looking for a bookshelf, and let's say they call the bookshelf something in Swedish that I have no idea, I will never find that bookshelf. But if I search bookshelf, probably because they have those keywords tagged in their description, it will still come up. That's
Mm.
actually a really, really good point. I wonder if that's what GoPro does. And I'm actually not sure.
Ask.
I will check myself, actually.
Going back to your point about like translation and it actually being a creative process in terms of like marketing translation, there's this term called transcreation. I'm wondering like what you think about it. and your experience in working with transcreation.
I love transcreation. It's the best. It's the most creative. It's the most fun. I used to argue that all of marketing translation is transcreation. Technically, it's not, because not all marketing content is uniquely creative, right? If it's a simple social media post that talks about just the facts of the company, that's translation, right? You don't really need to transcreate it. Everything else that is extremely creative for marketing should require transcreation. And unfortunately, in my experience, transcreation is a big deal. You have to pay for it differently. You have to request the work be done differently. Let's say, for example, as tagline, right? How you would pay for the hours, because you are essentially paying for the creative process. If it's only 3 words, you're not paying for the 3 words. You're paying for the research. You're paying for the thought process of the linguist to really digest the English tagline, to research what really does it mean in English? What are the word plays? What's the underlying message? And then to try to come up with something similar, yet completely different, something that would work for their target audience, that would work better. And how we know that our linguist is actually transcreating is that we ask them for, let's say, 3 different versions, and we always ask for a back translation. So, for example, if GoPro has a tagline that says buttery smooth, right? And my linguist goes back and gives me 3 options. And in the back translation, I see the word butter in each of those options. I know that they haven't transcreated. If I see ice, as smooth as ice, right? Then I know, okay, maybe ice, maybe it's a Nordic country, and to them, ice is smooth, ice skating, it's as smooth as a blade on an ice, something like that. To me, it tells me that the linguist has transcreated. They have used the overall message of something being extremely smooth, like butter, and they just put it somewhere else, like ice, for example, or something else that would be smooth, like marshmallow, for example, or like soap or something.
Yeah.
And so the back translation allows me to understand that if I'm actually paying for transcreation, or if the linguist charges me for transcreation, but actually provided just a translation of the 3 words.
I feel like transcreation could be its own podcast episode on its own. And what I'm really interested in is like, I'm taking some translation classes right now, but we don't really go through like marketing type of like translation. The closest thing would be like, I don't know, translating an article title, because those can sometimes like include metaphors and idioms and stuff. But I don't know, like kind of going on a segue, like transcreation, is it really taught to linguists? Like, are there linguists who can transcreate, and like what kind of qualities do they have? And yeah.
You haven't read or gone through this week's marketing module, have you?
I have, that's the thing.
Well, it teaches you to transcreate. Well, it doesn't teach you, it offers you the
Well, then I haven't.
Okay. Hang on. Could you repeat? Because I think you're gonna
Well, I guess, okay, so my question is like, are there a lot of linguists who are taught about transcreation, or like how is transcreation even done? Like, do you need to be a copywriter beforehand?
That's a really, really good question. I worked with some incredible linguists, just world class. And a lot of the times they refused transcreation work because they said, we're not copywriters, we're not marketers, we can't do this kind of work. And what we put into place was it was a big company. So we were lucky enough to have a lot of people all over the world. So we had the linguist paired together with a marketing specialist that spoke that language. So we had both the language expertise and also the marketing expertise. And together they work together to transcreate the tagline. But when that's not possible, the best thing that we can do to encourage linguists to transcreate is to get them out of this mindset of being afraid of getting the answer wrong, right? Thinking outside the box, having this, you have an ambiguous problem, meaning you have a tagline that kind of doesn't mean anything, and you have to find a way to localize it. For example, or to transcreate it. Slay in 4K was one of the taglines GoPro a couple of years ago had. It was a Christmas or holiday special for their cameras. Like it was a 4K video feature, and it was sleigh in 4K. It's hard to understand what that means in English, right? So it's like Santa's sleigh, like bring it in under the tree on Santa's sleigh, something like that, right? In a lot of countries, there's no concept of Santa Claus, and if there is, then at least he doesn't come to your house on a sleigh. And when we had that transcreation project, again, a lot of people just translated sleigh for sleigh, right? And that was mind-boggling, right? You guys don't have Santa Claus. You guys don't have a sleigh.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, exactly. And it just comes from a place where they're just afraid to deviate too far away from the text. I think in those cases, if a company has a lot of transcreation projects, it should do a big training program with their linguists. Have a brainstorming session, right? And have your linguists come up with the craziest ideas and be welcoming of those ideas. Show them that the crazier idea, the more you're going to love it. But you're right in the sense that there is a certain element of being a copywriter. And that is probably why a lot of linguists don't have that experience, right? I write in English, I speak English, but I'm not a copywriter. I can't come up with a creative tagline. So why is my expectation that my linguist can come up with a creative tagline? They speak the language, just like I speak English, but they can't come up with a marketing tagline because they don't have that experience. So it's a catch-22 kind of thing.
All right. So we talked about marketing stakeholders and like stakeholder education. On the flip side, I know you started in localization without a background in marketing. Tell me more about that.
So right away from SDL, the clients I was working with always were on some sort of marketing projects, right? So marketing assets, marketing clients, just all marketing projects. And I just fell in love with it. The creativity was just so amazing that they put into it, right? I saw how stakeholders approached every word and with how much thought and creativity that they put into it. And then at GoPro, same thing. I did marketing work, and those GoPro videos make you want to drop everything and go skiing or go bike riding. It's like you're watching a movie and it's just a short video advertising their feature or
Yeah,
their
they're
camera,
really
right?
cool.
They are. And being on the localization side of things allowed me to feel like I was part of making the magic happen. They did it only in English. I got to do it in 60 plus languages. So I
Wow.
still felt like I was part of the marketing team.
That's cool.
And that's what it should be. You know, the localization team is an extension of the marketing team, the localization team working on marketing projects, right? Or same can be said, the localization team is an extension of the legal team, or it's an extension of the product team, because we are taking the marketing assets and all we're doing is translating them and making them available to users all over the world. It's still the marketer asset, right? It's still their signature on this poster, right? It's still theirs. They should be interested in us doing the best work we can, because they're not going to want a mediocre English asset, right? And that's essentially what they're getting if they're asking us to cut corners. And so just that entire process of being involved with this magic, being part of that marketing team, just from day one, I was hooked.
I love that. I used to work at a marketing agency too, and I can definitely feel that magic of, you creating something end to end, and you can see that final project coming together for the client and also like for the end users. So it's super cool. My last question for you today, because we're running out of time, is what's something about international marketing today that excites you? Is there anything new that's coming up, or like, what's something that you've discovered that you're really passionate about?
This is constant. So the things that I just don't know yet is what I'm so excited about, because with every video that I have to localize and a linguist says this element won't work in my country, I get excited because it's an opportunity to make the video more local and have it speak to that audience that I wouldn't have known otherwise. It's also a learning experience for me and an opportunity to continue learning about different cultures outside of the classroom. Just with every single video, I learned something new about a culture that I had no idea about before. And then in the future, when our stakeholders do not use those elements in their videos, that's a win for us. And that's extremely exciting. That means my work is benefiting the marketing team. And in turn, again, with that thinking, it's benefiting our end user because it's just making it speak to them more and more.
That's so powerful. So overall, like I would say like your final words are like, just learning about other people, other cultures, just everything about being open-minded.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. And especially with marketing, because it's so creative, I get to learn about these different cultures every single day, because the processes that we have in place, we're not going to cut corners. We are going to give our linguists a voice. That's when I get to really learn about their cultures, when they're not afraid to tell me this is not going to work. I can't just translate these words. We need to actually redo this asset.
I think that for me, that's part of why I named this podcast Localize the World. And for me, it has a feeling of, by localizing the world, we can get to know each other a little bit by bit. And, each culture will be able to understand each other culture better in order to localize and understand each other.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the episode today.
We're not going to do the localizability check one?
Which one?
No, not the look. That was the answer. It was about the biggest accidents that I've seen.
Oh, okay. Wait, I don't know. You still have time?
I'm sure. This is my bread and butter. Of course I have time.
Oh my gosh, awesome. Okay. So I will ask you my last question. I'm really excited about this one because I don't know, I just like finding about mistakes and then how people overcome them. So what are some of the biggest or memorable international marketing blunders you've seen? And how do you think that accident happened? And what would you have done to prevent it?
Sure. So there are so many, but my most favorite of all time is Coca-Cola's Saudi Arabia blunder. So they had a series of 3 posters. Reading from left to right, you have a person dehydrated in the desert, just so hot, just lying in the sun. Second poster, they're drinking a Coca-Cola. And third poster, they're empowered. They're running, they're refreshed, they're rehydrated. Beautiful. Coca-Cola launched this series of posters without any text. It was just a series of posters. They launched these in Saudi Arabia, and people there read right to left. So they see the first poster, the one on the very right, which the person is running completely refreshed. The second poster is they're drinking Coca-Cola. And the third is now that they're dehydrated and laying down on the sand.
Coca-Cola is poison.
Exactly. Exactly. So this obviously was a fail on many, many levels. It was never sent to the localization team because there was no text, right? So a lot of teams think that localization is just translation. It's just translating the text. And it's much more than that. We could have prevented this by doing what is called a localizability check. Not a single Arabic linguist, because then you would have sent these posters to your Saudi Arabia SME, subject matter expert, which would be an Arabic linguist. Not a single Arabic linguist would have approved of these posters in the order that they are, right? They would have said, we have to flip them because people read from right to left. And so that's why when the marketing team has an idea or a draft or a sketch of something, send it to the localization team to review the elements. And I promise you, they will find at least the biggest issues. This would have saved Coca-Cola, 100%. Not a single Arabic linguist would have let those posters go to publish. This would have saved the company a lot of money and wasted assets, and of course a lot of embarrassment, because now they have shown that Coca-Cola is poison, right? As you correctly said. Another smaller blunder that we did, we saved it. That's why we have this. Another blunder that we did, we actually saved thanks to the localizability checks. We got a video, and there was a dog in this video. The video was only a walkthrough. It was a help center video. It helped users understand how to turn a specific feature on and off and how to use it. In order to show this feature, there was fake chat content, and there was a dog in there, right? Had nothing to do with the actual feature. And It was fine. They talked about getting their mom a puppy for her birthday, right? It was just a fake chat content, which in the United States, completely fine, right?
Mhm.
Our linguists in a couple different locales, in Indonesia, in Turkey, in India, our Arabic linguists, they said that we will lose the attention of our users. They will be disgusted, offended, and insulted. You simply don't want your users to be thinking those things when they're interacting with your videos, especially if it's a help center video. You want your users to be fully focused on the task at hand, how to turn this feature on and off, not to be disgusted by an irrelevant element that you have in this video. So then we changed it to, instead of it was a dog, we changed it to, I believe it was a cake, or maybe it was flowers, but it was something more neutral. So now, maybe it wasn't created specifically for them, it wasn't anything highly local, but at least it wasn't terrible, which the dog would have been terrible. We would have lost all of our Indonesian, Turkish users, Indian users. They would have been disgusted and they would have turned the video off. And thanks to the localizability check, that didn't happen. We were able to save that.
So in certain cultures, dogs are not viewed as cute pets that we have, more like just animals.
Right. They're absolutely not domesticated. They're seen as disgusting, horrible creatures, like
And
almost
that
like
would
monsters.
and that would have totally turned them off from WhatsApp.
Exactly. Or at least from that video, right? And this is a video that was supposed to help you turn a feature on and off and to explain to you how you were to use it. And what if you were actually there because watching this video because you needed help with this feature? Now you have to go somewhere else. Now you're upset with WhatsApp because now you have to figure out a different way to get the help you need.
So when it comes to localization, it's not just translating the text. It's translating that experience, but a part of that is not just the text, but it's maybe the graphics, maybe the images, the behaviors and things that are going on in the video, for example, anything that could be like a cultural, I guess, no.
That's exactly
Cultural
right.
turnoff.
That's exactly right. I love how you said it, translating the experience, because that's exactly what it is. We don't just translate the words. The value, the true value that the localization team brings in is this experience, right? Even if we don't have a single word in a marketing asset, still send it to the localization team, like that Coca-Cola poster, right? Not a single word, but the value that the localization team would have brought in would have been to say, we need to flip these images to give our users the same exact experience as the English-speaking users are getting.
Speaking about Coca-Cola, that reminds me of something I learned in class where David talked about Coca-Cola going into China, and then they changed their Coca-Cola name into Chinese, but the Chinese characters that they used was, I forgot what they meant, but it was like something really, really offensive, something about piss or something like that. And so even in that circumstance, it wasn't an image, but it was actually text. But they didn't consider the meaning of each character in the Chinese. So
That's terrible. That's what is wrong with Coca-Cola? I don't get it. I hope one of our students ends up working there and changes their whole approach to localization, because that could have been a machine translated tagline, which is heartbreaking that marketing is resorting to machine translation.
So that, I mean, I guess that covers all of our topics today, but like, thank you so much for talking about international marketing and how localization is so much a part of that experience, that process.
Absolutely. Lynn, thank you so much. As usual, it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Okay. Do you have any last words?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll stop recording.